I usually don't like to record niceties at the beginning because I'm always afraid that we're going to talk about the weather or just how things are, which
I
parts
don't. Th-
of my body ache, ill relatives. But then we're talking about how a 3.5-year-old feels about farms. And then I'm like, this is good stuff.
I,
We should be
I
recording everything.
I don't know in these years that you and I have ever talked about the weather. I mean, I think we have like a couple of times, but that's not typically a point of conversation.
Are you ready for a segue?
Do it.
If the weather is fundamental to your well-being, for example, if you are a farmer or a mountaineering enthusiast or a skier, or you live someplace with really dramatic weather changes frequently, I don't think talking about the weather is exchange of pleasantries. I think it's topical. But if you're doing it to fill time with someone who doesn't care what your answers are about it and who it doesn't matter, it's like just don't fill the space. Like don't fill the space with anything, or just talk about what your greatest fear and the thing that you failed at the hardest is. You're gonna have to get there anyway.
Yeah. So who's talking about their biggest failure first? You or me?
Well, okay, let's back up. I don't want to overcommit here. If we're talking about discipline and we're doing an exercise of roses and thorns or strikes and gutters or pick your name of good thing, bad thing um, exercise. So it's basically times that discipline was successful or areas in which discipline continues to be applied, and then areas where discipline has not been applied or has been attempted and failed. So I don't have like a colossal failure here other than I do think that my basic premise is that the reason I apply discipline to anything is so that I can do less stuff or do more stuff, but then get to the relaxing part of my life as best as possible. You know what I mean? There's like this prison movie trope where the prisoners are assigned some work task, and then the protagonist prisoner comes in, and they're like, "Let's do the work really fast, and then we'll just cool our heels." And then everybody's all confused because usually the prisoners take this long, and this time they were fast. And it's like, no, man, in prison they'll just find more work for you. Like being done. That's why everybody was slow about the work in the first place. It's because there is no like cool your heels and chill out when you're done in prison.
Yeah.
So do you want me to give me a fail? I'll give you a failing. I have
Where
these. I have a double failing.
so how are you framing how are we framing it exactly? If the discussion is discipline, how a lack of discipline has led to a failure? Is that the framing?
Mm, no, I'm looking at it as a failure of discipline, meaning you
Ah,
wanted to be disciplined and we're not.
okay.
So this is the most like typical uh, generic example would be I wanted to diet, I started a diet, or I started a New Year's resolution about diet or exercise, and by February 3rd, I've broken all the rules and I failed to follow through.
So I want to ask to because I'm curious. So diet is a broad term. What was the eating pattern and what was the desired eating pattern?
Oh, so first of all, I've never committed to any sort of disciplined eating, so that's probably not a good example for me. That was a generic, like that was to frame generally what kind of
Gotcha.
scale of failures
Gotcha.
we're talking about here. But it's worth discussing my pattern of eating because the end of this is going to be a discipline challenge, and you're going to have to pick what area you think I should apply discipline to. So I'll tell you my eating habits. Uh, I eat generally whatever I want, generally whenever I want, but also tend to stick to 3 meals a day. I eat at the exact same time 3 times a day, and I have for years and years and years and years and years and years. Not because of discipline. That's just when the food is, and that's when I eat. I generally eat slightly larger portions than I think would contribute to a 2,000 calorie diet. Uh, I usually struggle to figure out what to eat for lunch, and I tend to put some snack time in the mid afternoon. My snacks tend to be like pure junk food, chips, candy, cookies. Um, for a long time, I would drink beer or a cocktail probably like 10 to 15 a week, but it would be spread out over the whole week. Lately, like over the last 2 years, that declined a lot. My vegetable intake isn't super high because I don't like vegetables very much. I love carbs, breads, sugar. These things really like speak to me.
So, do you know who the broadcaster Al Michaels is?
No, I don't. I
He
mean, maybe I do.
he was the guy who did the Olympics when the U.S. amateurs beat the Soviet professionals in 1980 or 79, whatever year that was. He was the call of that, but he's an NFL broadcaster now. I think he might do a college game or two as well. He's very well known in football.
Yeah, I clearly know who this guy is,
Yeah,
just not my name.
yeah. So this was as of last week. This was broken news last week. He's never had a vegetable in his life. Ever. It's interesting to me.
There's a guy I knew who's not famous who didn't drink water. So water went into his system, but it was by way of food and Coca Cola. So he'd have like a couple Cokes a day, and that was his water intake. That was it. If he's thirsty, Coke. If he's got a drink with a meal, Coke.
Yeah. That's
I can't even imagine what that does to a human body.
yeah, especially if it's Coke. I mean, it's acid.
Well,
Anyway,
they've taken the cocaine out of it, so that's probably slightly better.
well, I mean, like all there are there are acidic properties of Coke. You've seen the videos, I'm sure, where it cleans dirty, rusty pennies or whatever. Uh,
Yeah, for whatever reason, the one that stuck with me was it was cleaning the rust off of a tennis net tensioner. And I'm like, why this as the
yeah.
example? It's a weird choice. I mean, yeah, sure, it sits out all day and gets rusty. Why that as the rusty thing? Yeah,
Yeah.
that stands out.
Well, it was probably whoever was executing that experiment. That is what they saw and thought that would be interesting to see if Coke would clean that.
All right, so the pros of my discipline on food are I generally eat at the same time
Very
most of the
good.
time. Uh, I so that routine is like 7 days a week. I eat breakfast and dinner at the same time always. Lunch usually noon. Sometimes on the weekends is not noon. And for most of my life, I generally didn't eat very large portions or a lot of fast food or junk food. I mostly ate a pretty balanced diet, kind of carb heavy. As I got older, that slid, and I started to eat much less healthy food and slightly higher proportions and snack more all at the same time. So definitely like a decline there.
Well, why? Can you point out any reasons why?
Um, the biggest reason is that I think I'm food disabled in the sense mentally disabled in the sense that I don't think about food ever until I'm already hungry. Like I don't think about the grocery store. I don't think about what this week is going to have menu wise. I don't think about cooking. I don't fantasize about how good a meal is going to be. Uh, I live. My relationship with food is instantaneous.
Yeah.
Like I'm hungry now. What's the closest thing that I can eat? And if there's like a prepared packaged item that's going to be tasty, like pick whatever version of tasty is. I'm like I'm gonna have that right now. And then as soon as I'm not or not hungry anymore, I'm like, okay, on to whatever thing wasn't food. I think it's possible that if food came in a pellet or a pouch, I would just eat one item to give me sustenance forever, which is a problem, I
Have you
think.
have you been able to draw any parallels between what you consume when you don't think about food and how you feel?
Emotionally, like the food,
Well,
I feel
just like, do you feel sharp all day? Do you feel
good.
clear-headed?
So here's a good transition to other pieces of my life, my mental and physical self, as well as my habit self and my discipline self. So the healthiest I ever ate was when I was running a lot. So this was probably most of my 20s. I ran a good amount, like not as much as you, but farther than you. And much slower than you. But at that, when I was running a lot, particularly if I was training for an event, I would have much less appetite. So like I would find food much less satisfying if, particularly if I was having to run really far, like more than 6 or 8 miles. Uh, if I had a long run, I would want to have a lot of kind of like clean calories, basically. So get me whatever the thing that refills my batteries as much as possible. But the last thing on earth I ever wanted was to feel full, because even if I was 24 hours out from the next time I was going to have to go run, I knew that that feeling of fullness was going to be catastrophic and make me feel so much worse the next time I had to exert myself, even
Yeah.
if it was a day later. So for a long time, I was eating pretty well, not like because the what's a good food and a bad food to put in your body. And I'm not talking like health nut or anything like that, but I think it was probably Michael Pollan. His diet guides are eat food, not too much, mostly vegetables. And like that's his whole guidance. So I kind of had that part down, and then throw the exercise in, that suppressed the appetite, and I basically ate what my body told me it needed, and that was great. That worked fine. But it was also hours and hours and hours and hours a week of distance running.
Yeah. What about the mental state? Like, what's the, can you, do you have a vivid recollection of being noticeably sharper and more crisp during that time? Or is
I
it the same?
so I think that in my mind, my self perception was that when I had less of an alcohol craving and less of a fats and sweets craving, and the portion control tied in with the exercise, I think my self assessment was, oh, I also felt more alert and was in a better mood. Everyone around me denies that that was the case, and they're like, you're exactly the same regardless of whether you are taking care of yourself or not. We don't care if you drink or exercise. It's not making any difference.
Yeah. I think though that that may be the case because your personality, your character is what it is. But I feel like the difference or the distinction for me is the level of clarity and crispness, like the command of facts that what few I've learned. If I'm diligent and disciplined with an exercise regimen, which I am, and a diet, like all of that stuff, all the things that I want to do through the course of the day, I have the mental acuity to do quickly. And it's not, there's no lag between my intent and my execution. Like I have the ability to make that happen because I feel like I'm sharp all day long. If I don't do, if I'm not disciplined with the way I eat, the way I train, all of the other things, and sleep has really, I used to be, I'll sleep when I'm dead guy.
Yeah,
That's changed tremendously. It's a fight for me because I don't like to be in bed. I like the way I feel afterwards, but the discipline of all these things together has really allowed me to be, I get up, 5 o'clock, 4:35 every morning. And from the time I get up until the time I go to bed, I feel sharp. I feel crisp. I feel like I could go run right now. And I feel like that all day long. And that's what I want. I don't care about the other things. I'm not trying to be David Goggins. I just want to be crisp and sharp all day long.
I think so. When I while I this is a recurring theme too. So while I was running, um, I would try and set reasonable yardsticks and reasonable goals. Right. So it was uh, like I'd run a little bit in high school, then I didn't really run in college. Then after high school or after college, I started running a little bit more. And so the goal was like go from nothing to a marathon. You have a year, and the goal for the marathon was finish and don't get hurt. Right, like that was the only objective. So these were very soft targets, meaning they were not difficult to achieve. But the way that it worked was, and the reason I was able to do it was because all I did was lay out a plan for 10 months worth of runs, and I just followed the plan. So it was find somebody else's plan. On this day you run this far. If you miss it, there's 2 days off a week in this plan, so do it the day that you would have had an off day, and never miss a full week's worth of training, right? Like, just no matter what, you're going to do this, because if you do it, you'll be able to finish the marathon. If you don't do it, you won't be able to finish the marathon. So do the plan. And there was very little thought applied to it, other than I would like to have, a year from now, once we get past the race, I want to have finished the race. And to do that, there's every piece of evidence. It was basically a certainty that if I was able to complete the training as written, I would be able to complete the marathon. And that, like, there were questions about, can you complete the training? Are you gonna, burn out or lose steam or lose interest or whatever? But by the time you're up to, running 12 miles, when a few months ago you basically weren't running really at all, at that point you're like, what's the difference between running 12 miles and just finishing out this training? So I'll finish it and it'll be fine. And that went really well. But there hasn't been another example, and this was, going on 10 years ago. There hasn't been another example of a year-long physical discipline thing that I've taken on. There hasn't been a goal. There hasn't been a plan. There hasn't been follow through. There's a bunch of other stuff that I've done, but none of those things have had discipline applied to them since.
So I heard Peter Attia explain this, and just stressing the importance of physical discipline, exercise, strength training. And I think it was explained by VO2 max, which I'm not going to embarrass myself trying to explain what that is scientifically, but it was basically, this was his analogy, that we all know smoking's bad for you, right? Smoking increases.
I have a succinct VO2 max explanation.
Okay.
So this is measuring your blood oxygen level, right? And it's basically, can you have a lot of oxygen in your blood or just a little bit of oxygen in your blood? It is a very broad indicator of aerobic health.
Cardiorespiratory fitness.
Yeah.
That's what I was going to say, but that's a better explanation. Anyway, his point was, we know smoking's bad, that in terms of all-cause mortality, so death from any sort for people who smoke, it's a 2x increase. So all-cause mortality goes up 2x if you smoke. Having a top quartile VO2 max reduces all-cause mortality 5x. So all-cause mortality, all things considered, if you have a top quartile, top 25% VO2 max, it reduces all-cause mortality 5x. And his explanation was, there's not a drug on the market that can do that. Like, there is nothing more powerful for human physiology than cardiorespiratory and strength, the discipline of being physically fit. And so I think there are, and how many things are downstream of that? How many, what's the death wish of an older person with brittle bones from years of, basically atrophying from not being physically active, and you have a fall, you break your hip. That's pretty, that's the end of the line. And I think there's so many things like that are downstream of physical discipline beyond just the day to day at our ages, or, me slightly older than you. There are so many things downstream years from now that are impacted by the being sedentary through this time period. So
Right. Now, that's what I had in mind when, I wasn't running for the sake of being fast and proving something to somebody else. I was running to have an understanding of what physical fitness looked like as a whole life thing, so that I would have some baseline to go back to and say, am I meeting it year by year? Am I meeting it month by month? If the annual goal is generally be fit, like, what does that actually turn into as you age into needing to protect your body more, and not so much press your body, and be familiar with it, so that I wasn't like, turning 45 or 50 or 55 and be like, well, the doctor says I got to get in shape, so I guess I got to go figure out what that means.
yeah. Well, would you say that when you were in that year phase of training, I'm assuming you did the marathon.
Yeah.
Yeah. When you were in the phase for the year prior training for it, what would you say your relationship was with that discipline of training? Were you ambivalent? Did you dread it? Were you receptive to it? Like, what was your Did you have any obstacles to overcome from a mindset standpoint?
Um, I just didn't think much about it. I decided I was going to do it. I was committed to it because it was something that I thought was important and I decided to do. And it was, it was more time consuming than I was expecting, basically. And other than being more time consuming than I was expecting, and I think generally making me sore than I was expecting, I would say it went otherwise. It was like I went into it. Uh, the actual goal was a little bit different. It wasn't complete a marathon. It was more like, how long, months wise, do I need to run before I stop just hating every second of the entire process? Is there a level of fitness where if I get this good enough at running, that it no longer bothers me to do? And I talked to a couple different people. Several people said, it took them a year or so to become a runner. So that seemed like a good timeline. I did that. I got in my head like, well, never get to a point where your fitness is worse than being able to go run 10K. So 6 miles, which is far for a person who doesn't run, but not far at all for somebody who runs, and not particularly far for somebody who's generally in shape but not a runner. And that was my yardstick for a long time, is if you feel like you couldn't go run a 10K right now, get in better shape.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's I think it's there's an echo. It might be from me. I'm not sure, but I think it's interesting to. I think about this whole topic, and we're maybe getting off out of our just discipline discussion. But I think about the topic of health and fitness and diet and just sort of this physical discipline uh, category, the umbrella, and how much of what I knew or thought I knew about this, which was conventional wisdom, parenthetically, from earlier years, has been proven to be wrong. And there are a million of
Give me
these.
an example of that.
Cholesterol causes heart disease. High cholesterol causes heart disease. That eggs are bad for you. That a million of these types of things. There are a bunch of them.
Oh,
And
margarine is superior to butter.
correct,
That was a big one.
correct, yeah, correct. Um, and I just think, you know, there's no, if you think about like our evolutionary history, there's no substitute for trying to do the things that are native to how we've evolved. That's a silly and a broad statement, sort of taken literally, but like you think about how we evolved, as foragers, as hunters, and you get up and you move all day long. There were periods of rest, there were periods of sleep and that sort of thing, but we've gotten a long way away from the things that physically and how we eat and how we move and the things that we do. We've gotten a long way away from that. And I think, of course, we have diseases associated with sedentary lifestyle and obesity and all of those things. And I think, that there should be, sort of tying. I don't know how you do it policy wise, other than incentivize it, but there should be a focus on this type of stuff, the discipline of being healthy. And
I
we,
like that. I like the evolutionary history angle to this. I have no idea how valid any of this is, but I've
it,
never thought about persistence hunting before. You know what this is?
I know the term.
So it's, imagine the story that I tell myself, or was somebody told me, and then I like latched onto this as, as a story, right? Like possibly a myth, but it's, ye olde humans, somewhere between cave people and modern man, hunted our food by chasing a herd of woolly mammoths until the woolly mammoth was too exhausted to put up a fight, and then we beat it to death with sticks and rocks. And I'm like, what do you mean? How do you just follow a thing until it's tired? Well, you days and days and days and days of walking after the thing, and if it slows down too much, you start beating it with sticks and rocks. And I'm like, wow, that's so you just walk? That's it? We just walked until the food gave up. It's like, yeah, and that's one of the reasons we walk on 2 feet is because it gave us a major, efficiency advantage. And I was like, holy crap, that's wild. So if I just do the stuff that my body is already designed for, that's probably going to be close to good enough, right? Like I don't need a Bowflex. I hope Bowflex isn't still in business
Have you
because
heard of rucking?
I was going to bring up rucking too, and
Yeah.
so rucking is go walk around kind of far, fast, carry some heavy stuff in a backpack.
And I think man, that's the way you delivered that,
It's
intentionally
basically an
or
ad
otherwise.
for rucking.
It was sort of dismissive, not intentionally, but it was a simplification of what rucking is, because that's what it is. I think that's a really important point, though. I think with a lot of this stuff, we make it too hard, and that impacts the ability to execute the discipline.
Totally, totally.
Like,
That's one
just
of the points I was trying to bring up yesterday. Is if we were talking about your son, and if your son sees what you're doing, fitness wise, or meditation, or work, or any other thing, but let's stick with, like, I think you were bringing up running yesterday. If he sees what you're doing as unattainable because you can do it but he can't, and he's blind to all of the middle stuff in between, then that's a huge obstacle to picking up and going and running a mile or a half mile or 6 minutes. Like, if he runs 6 minutes for 2 weeks, he'll be able to run a mile in 3 weeks, right? Like, and
yeah.
and that's all there is to it. Everybody knows it will work that way. But if you're in your head about how it can't be done because Terry is uniquely, specially able to do it, then you're never going to start because you think that it's exclusive to somebody else. And what got in my head about the persistence hunting and about rucking was anyone can walk after a woolly mammoth. All you got to do is walk.
And so, what does that look like practically on a day to day basis? It's things like this, in my opinion. And there are many reasons why this is a pet peeve of mine. But I watch people drive around through a busy parking lot for 15 minutes, for 10 minutes, looking for a spot somewhat close to the door. It's like, when I park, these are all things that are just, and this is not, again, I'm not trying to be David Guys, it's just what I do. I park as, it's quicker, it's easier, but I park as far away as I can, and I walk a little further to the door. I take stairs. Like, you could, there are little things that people can do, that everyone can do from a discipline perspective. Just get up and move. Like, get up and do something hard without trying to have it be defined as a formal workout that you have to commit to and sign up to. And because I think people feel like they're committing to this bill of goods that is indefinite and it's long term, and they have to commit to the whole thing, when there are just sort of intermediate steps on the journey to that are equally beneficial. Like, just get up and do stuff.
All right, we might end up having to stretch this into a third day, but I have a couple of other examples to get away from pure physical fitness. The
Yes.
intention here is to get you my mindset about discipline, my baseline on things I'm disciplined and not disciplined. My examples here was kind of like a mixed bag on physical fitness. I will come out and tell you right now, I do not have a fitness regimen or regime or a diet regime now at all. I still eat whatever I want. There's probably too many snacks. I don't really drink a lot of alcohol, but I drink some. I love food that tastes good, and I eat it whenever I feel like it. And I am I'm like slightly heavy for my size. I'm 5'11", 200 pounds. Like, not an unreasonably overweight person. I'm not very strong because I don't do things that require strength. Um, I'm active. Like, I am outside a lot. I ride my bike a bunch of different places. I ride my e-bike places. I ride my regular bike places. I generally am up and about all the time. I definitely don't live a sedentary lifestyle, but I'm not a fitness person. Okay, so that's physical health covered, diet covered, which I feel like you can't talk about discipline in America in 2023 without talking about these things. So, next thing, when I was a kid learning to play guitar, I practiced a lot by just playing guitar. I started playing when I was 12 or 13. Started playing bass guitar, and then eventually started playing guitar as well, electric, acoustic, whatever. Just played guitar, but that meant sound would come out of a guitar in my bedroom for an hour at a time most days. Um, I didn't really know what to practice per se, but I knew that it was important to play because if you don't practice, you won't get good. I spent some time writing songs. I spent some time with band rehearsal. I had bands that were very good at rehearsing, meaning you show up to rehearsal, there's a set of songs that you're supposed to play. Everybody knows the song, or it's a day where you're going to learn the song together. I had other bands where you show up and five people play five different things for the whole practice. Somebody tries to get it organized. It never really works. You eventually have a gig and you sort of kind of play like two songs and it's fine. So I had both of those at the same time. I stopped playing guitar completely in sometime in the middle of college. Didn't get rid of all my instruments. I think I kept probably one or two guitars, but they sat on a shelf for 10 plus years. Then I got back to it after taking a very long break. Honestly, I didn't miss playing guitar during the break. I just decided when I had my first kid that I didn't. My biggest hobby at the time was playing video games and computer games, and I thought, oh, and running far. And like a better thing to do while I have a baby at my feet, who can't even stand up. I could be playing video games, but why not play guitar? Maybe it'll be good for his brain. Certainly, it'll be good for me. Let's just see how I like this. And so that was now about 8 years ago, and I don't practice guitar every day now, but for those 8 years, most days I have made music, and I feel pretty comfortable with like the pace of progress and my general prowess around playing music. I had incremental goals. So first it was like find this tone that I really wanted. I realized that one of the problems with playing guitar in my basement was I was trying to sound like the record, but I had, a $50 amp and not like no backing band, so I didn't feel like I was ever going to sound like the record, and I was always kind of like bummed that I didn't sound like the record. So when we did the boomerang thing and now I'm a grown up, I've got some years of experience of like, you know learning how to do things as a grown up instead of as a kid. I'm like, well, it's just going to be me and this guitar, so let me figure out what solo guitar sounds good. And that was a combination of like learn a couple of alternate tunings, figure out a tone that you want to chase, decide if it's going to be acoustic or electric. Like I wasn't really into classical guitar, and I don't really like folky kind of music, so I'm like, what's the best solo guitar in this case? Some kind of like jazzy folky solo guitar with no singing is going to be the thing. So then I chased that tone for like 2 years. Then eventually kind of felt like I would grow and learn, grow and learn, grow and learn, get flat. Then I'd set a new goal, and the new goal would be like, okay, well, you need to record a couple songs. So figure out how to record songs. And I had done that in high school, but all the tech was completely different. So figure out a digital workflow. Okay, so do that, do that. That was like 2 years. Then, okay, you're doing fine, but you're kind of plateauing. You need to be playing with people again. So then spend so and so amount of time going and playing with people. And then that, right now we're kind of in a plateau where it's like I either need to write and produce and record an album, or have a band and play out, or do something else. But there's nothing that is making me get up past the next plateau. On the other hand, this is now a repeated cycle across 8 full years. And I'm not terribly concerned about being on the plateau. At some point, I'll get on an on ramp, like get on a ramp again, set a new goal, and do more music stuff. And I don't feel in any way uncomfortable with being on that plateau. So that's a pretty positive example of discipline, habit, routine, goal setting. And I think the biggest takeaway, the two discipline points about this. One, I have a guitar hung up in basically every room of my house, and I play them when I see them, and I play them when I think about it. And if I think about playing guitar and I'm at my house, I'm never more than 3 steps away from a guitar. So the guitars get played, and that was huge. It was a like massive change in the way I approach guitar. There's no practice time. All of the time is practice time because you can be doing something else at the same time too.
Yeah.
So that was huge.
Yeah. And that's again, that the point is, and it is not exclusively, just about you and the discipline of playing an instrument, but all of the things that are downstream of you doing that, the release, the focus, the skill acquisition, the you know the fact that your children see you doing this thing and maybe they're drawn to do that thing and they're really drawn to it. I mean, all of the potentially positive things downstream from just, it's not just you choosing to or not to play guitar in a vacuum. There are a lot of things that are sort of impacted by that I think are not trivial points.
Yeah, the whole thing, all of, and so I wouldn't say I don't even think guitar is my primary music interest at this point. It's music more generally. I like
Sure.
making music. I happen to play guitar. I also like electronic music. I also like production and engineering a lot. Um, so the working backwards from, I remember being a kid and being like, man, I sure hope my fingers last until I'm old so I can still do this. I can't wait to be an old guy sitting on the porch having a lifetime of guitar playing. It would be such a shame if I can't keep doing this. And then, this huge chunk of my life where I was like, I just didn't do it at all. And I didn't even feel bad about it. So what used to be my grand lifelong vision of I hope I can be a guitarist forever, that just like it went to nowhere. It literally fizzled out into a non thing. And the shocking part wasn't that it changed. The shocking part was that it didn't bother me in the slightest that it had
Mm.
changed. And then it turns out, as the arc of life continues, now, I mean, I was talking about plateaus in a particular stint of musical learning or whatever, but, that was just a plateau of its own. It just happened to be long. And maybe I'm going to be playing guitar when I'm old. Maybe I'm not. It probably doesn't matter. But the pathway still has steps that I'm on that I'm taking towards still making music, as a lifetime thing. But as an adult, instead of a kid, I'm able to back out and say, well, if you're not getting better each year, why are you even bothering? Number one, because you're not good enough to justify not getting better. And number two, if you're not, doing the stuff that takes a little while. So learning more songs, building a repertoire, or learning a new skill set, or learn something that you didn't know before about it and do that every single month, then you're never going to have the years where you feel like you grew that year. Work backwards to, okay, well, if every month I have to do it this way, what's the weekly goal look like? Is that learn one song or is that learn a section of a song? And then work backwards to, well, every day you have to pick up the instrument. And if you're picking up the instrument every day, it almost doesn't matter how well you're picking it up each day. I mean, you can't just like totally goof off, but the back of your mind will always be, I've got a gig coming up, or I've got a band practice coming up, or I've got that thing I've been working on that I really need to be learning. And then all of a sudden your hands are doing the thing that you need to be practicing without really thinking about it. And you weren't really thinking about it when you went and picked up the instrument, and you weren't really thinking about it when you started playing the thing that needed practicing. And all of a sudden you get to the thing that makes me proud about this. I got a wedding coming up, and my brother-in-law asked me to play this song, and he's like, can you finger pick? And I'm like, hey man, I got 6 months to learn this song. I'm pretty sure I can handle whatever it is. And it's a really difficult song played at like 165 beats per minute. And I'm like, shit, that's so fast. But I had forever, so I just worked on it slowly. I set the boundaries of what I was going to have to do, and I think if you look backwards to that, like the teenage vision of wanting to be somebody who can play guitar, it just means that when somebody says, hey, can you play this song for me, it doesn't have to be like, oh yeah, but I don't know, I'm not really comfortable, this is going to be like a real stretch for me. It's more like, yeah, it seems like a hard song, but I'll work on it and learn it.
Yeah.
And so I've achieved the thing that was what I thought I wanted way back when. And I never had the discipline in the 6, 7, 8 years I was playing as a kid. I just didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what the discipline was to actually apply targeted learning. So I was sort of doing just like aimless stuff with that each day, because I had it's important to play each day, but I didn't have what do you have to do each week to make for a meaningful month, to make for a meaningful year, to serve the lifelong goal. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think even if it's not guitar, whatever it is that we're discussing in that context, what you just said is important. That it's what do you do each day? What do you do each week? What does that look like over a month? And I think the compounding of that is pretty significant for any discipline discussion, whatever it is. That's a significant point.
I got two more.
Shoot.
They're fast. They're faster, and they're so one of them is a methodology. One is a topic of learning. So the next one, I'm going to go with the topic of learning and then the methodology. So topic of learning was at some point I decided I wanted to learn Spanish, and as with most of these circumstances, it was a very small moment, and then I'm like, oh, I think I want to do this. Uh, I realized like I took German in high school, 5 years of that. I never became close to fluent, but I was comfortable, listening to it. But then lost it all because I didn't speak it, didn't use it, and I have no knowledge of German now. I but I remember probably just walking down the street or on a run or something, and I was thinking to myself, I'm like, yeah, it's just a shame I'm not going to live in Germany anytime soon because then it would be great to just use that language all the time. And it came to me like just out of nowhere, like you moron. There are plenty of Spanish speaking people here, like a huge population of Spanish speaking people. If you want to have Spanish grocery store, Spanish newspaper, Spanish radio station, like just take that you can't mentality. And now I'm going to sound like a moralizing here. But what was a I can't because in my mind because I don't live in Germany or because I don't work for a German company or whatever. Suddenly I realized that I'm like, why are you putting up this obstacle? Because the obstacle of you're not going to live in Germany is a totally genuine obstacle to a problem that is not the actual problem. Your
Yeah.
problem is you want to learn a language. So if you want to learn a language, take the benefit of being immersed in it and find the thing that you already have at your disposal and do that. So, part of it was like kid was born and I was looking at immersion schools and things like that. So the way this is shaken out is I now speak some Spanish. I understand more than I speak. My routine for it is basically just do daily exercises on the phone, mostly Duolingo, and talk to people when it comes up. And that's basically it. But every single day, do 10 minutes of exercises. All of a sudden it's been 8-10 years of 10 minutes a day of exercises, and I just don't think about it. It's like you meditating and running. Spanish is just a thing that I practice 10 minutes a day, and I think nothing at all about it.
So, what is your handle on Duolingo?
Probably just my name. It has handles. Here's how I've been doing it long enough that I'm unfamiliar with making Duolingo friends, really.
It's not Russell.
It's not Russell. Hold on, I'm looking it up. Right now I have a 983-day streak, but I've had like a
Is your
couple
is
years
your
we
is your
broke.
picture of a baby?
It's a baby. Yeah.
All right. I'm now following you on Duolingo. I've done Spanish. I'm about to come up on a year streak. So I all your German background was my
Yeah.
Spanish background. Had it in high school, tested out of some in college, but then had a few semesters in college. And I had the benefit of working with a pair of Guatemalan brothers at a pizza place in college and spoke exclusively in Spanish with them. And at one point, I was very comfortable in the language and then didn't use it for a lot of years. But I started Duolingo about a year ago and it all like sort of came very quickly. Now, there's no substitute for going to a Spanish restaurant or a Mexican restaurant and speaking Spanish. There's no substitute for that. But I've found this to be very valuable.
I feel like that. So I feel like the discipline piece to it, it's to have the guitar on the wall right there. It's to have the bass line. So and the way you hear, the people that write the habit books, like the Atomic Habits we talked about yesterday, there it almost becomes when your self image or your identity is tied up in I'm a guitar player, or your self image is tied up in I'm a Spanish speaker or I'm bilingual, which I'm not. But if you are if you value yourself and you think of yourself as that's either your identity or at least part of your identity, that's when you get to the point where you stop thinking about it, and you're not necessarily thinking about your identity, out loud, if you will, really at all. So, the physical fitness, the health, like that stuff is all wrapped up in your identity. But if you've never once described yourself as a runner, and it's like clearly you are, but you don't think of yourself in terms of anything other than that, and therefore it's not even worth, it doesn't come up in your mind.
Yeah, I struggle with identities. Like I don't feel like I have an identity.
Yeah,
My
no.
ident- I'm I want my identity to be esoteric things. Like I want to be kind, and I want to be a good father, and I want to be intelligent and curious, and those things I want to be my identity. But there is no external thing that is my identity. My work is not, never will be. The band, none of those things are my identity, and I don't want them to be. All of
Have
the
you
fit.
have you considered getting a Harley? Because then you can just wear your identity on the weekend.
Yeah, no, I'm not a motorcycle person, and I don't give a crap about cars either. I'm not a car guy. If I were to ever be wealthy, like that
Filthy
well,
rich. Filthy, yeah.
yeah, that wealthy, I would not be come see my garage full of cars. That's just not. It's not my thing. I like a nice car, I guess, but I would be the person. Not that I'm not trying to be Warren Buffett here and say that I live in the same house since the 1950s and I have 54 private planes, but I would probably have a room full of vintage musical instruments and vintage gear. That would be repulsive and grotesque, but I would not have a garage full of cars.
I Yeah. So I think the question I was trying to get at was, with the when it becomes such second nature that it's part of who you are. I am not sure that, like, there's only so much room in the day, right? So you can't be a professional mountain climber while also being, a professional, like a pizza chef in Brooklyn, and you can't also be, an EV pioneer while you're also being, a competitive ultra marathoner. Like, you can't do all of those things at the same time. So being able to do the goal setting exercise and figuring out what is going to be enough and what's going to be the stuff where I really need to apply the discipline, that's the part where I worry about, conflating discipline and willpower. And it's like, well, no amount of willpower is going to give you more hours in the day, right? Like, you can be as disciplined as you can be, but eventually the most important discipline is picking what's important to you, right? Because that's the thing that nobody else is going to be able to do for you. If you say, I want to be an ultra runner, now you can outsource so many of the other different pieces of being an ultra runner to somebody else who's already done it. Or if you want to be a business owner, you can look at everybody else who's ever been a business owner. But being able to get that first decision point of that's a thing that's important to me, either above everything else or in this particular order, that's where it's like the discipline that matters to me is the knowing what you're after, and then the follow through piece is just make it a habit, because once you've figured out that's the thing that's important to you, you know fall back on human laziness and your propensity to not want to think a lot about who you are, or your propensity to do the same thing day after day, and just make it completely routine.
Yeah, I think that's the key. I think that's essentially what discipline is. What you just explained is it's not conceptualizing what it is that you're doing. You're just doing it. And when I get up in the morning, I don't think about the fact that I'm going to do these things. Like it's just, I'm thinking about other things. Like, what are the new things in my environment? What do I want to be the new things in my environment? I'm also going to do these things that I do every morning, but that's not occupying mind space for me. I've moved on to the next set of things. And I think that's what discipline brings you. I don't think you go from zero to that. I think there are a lot of intermediate steps, but I think that's what a healthy discipline looks like. Is it's just what you do. It's just the thing that you do, and I enjoy that.
So you've got you've got transcendental meditation, you've got running, you've got band practice, you've got work. Like there are a bunch of things that you are diet, nutrition. You have a bunch of domains in which you have good discipline. I talked about some. I talked about kind of vaguely a bunch of ones that I had struggled with. I talked even more vaguely about ones that were more disciplined. I feel like there's still room to compare notes on Terry's discipline versus Russ's discipline, and who is more disciplined. I think you're more disciplined, but I actually kind of want to challenge you. Like I want to take more steps into this is the day to day for me, and is my day to day like when I explain that to you, does that come off to you as discipline or does that come off to you as undisciplined? And I want to get really in the weeds and like press you on. Yeah, I used to be really into these like I can't even remember what they were called, but they were like the day in the life of some notable person, usually business person, and some like life hack blog or something would be like, this is what happens from the time they wake up to the time they go to sleep. And I would read those things religiously, just basically comparing notes and being like, should I be more like this person is? Are they achieving things that I want to achieve? Is there something I can learn from what they do in one given day, or even how they respond to the question of what they do in a given day? So I want to get into that exercise with you. I want Terry's day in the life next time,
Oh man, yeah.
and then I want you to, to play the role of discipline coach. I'm going to give you a list of areas that I think I could be more disciplined in, and areas where I feel like I'm already disciplined, and we're going to compare my rankings of myself versus your rankings of me, and see if Terry, the discipline coach, approves of my level of discipline or not.
Yeah, I think if the measure based on what you have explained, I think if the measure of everyone's perception of discipline seems to fall on physical discipline, so health and nutrition and that sort of thing. But I think outside of that, I think you admittedly were admitting to admitting to being undisciplined with health and fitness and nutrition now. But I think outside of that, you're a smart guy who's married to the same person, with raising children, and you're living a disciplined lifestyle in a lot of ways, and probably all the ways outside of health and nutrition and that sort of thing. So I can
I feel like there's so much more I want to dig into on this. We got to keep going on discipline. I
let's
can't
do
do
it.
it today. We got to do more.
Yeah, let's do it.
I want. Do you know Marie Kondo? Do you know who that is?
I don't.
All right. Google Marie Kondo. I think it's Kondo. That's your homework. Is Google Marie Kondo. I'll set up the outline for the next one, and we'll come back at it again.
Cool. I'm going to pull this name up.
Thanks, Coach Terry.
Have a good one, man.
Yeah.